What's up, everyone, and welcome to the third episode of Indie Interviews. And today I'm joined by Sander Meijer from the Netherlands, or also known as SixthFloorMemories.
Hey, thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me.
Sure. So tell us what you're about and what you do.
Well, I guess I'm a songwriter, sort of an amateurish music producer from the Netherlands, like you said, and I released an EP about 2 years ago, and I'm currently working on an album. So yeah, I mostly sing and play the guitar, but I do most things myself. But I'm not good at piano or anything, and I program drums and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's a challenge sometimes, but yeah, I'm doing it all myself. That's basically the thing.
Yeah, creating music sure is a challenge. Though I have to say, like I really like your sound a lot. It's
thanks.
for if people who haven't heard it, I would describe it as like your latest single. What was it called? About Love is No Game, I believe was the name.
Exactly.
And I really like that song. I have it on my playlist, and whenever it comes on, I just listen to it all the way through because it's quite. I would describe it as quite atmospheric.
Yeah, well, it's funny that you mentioned that because that was actually really what I was going for. I really don't know what to describe my songs as in terms of genres and that sort of thing. I guess it's more on the poppier side. It has some trap beat influences. Somebody once said, like, what if Oscar and the Wolf had discovered trap music? And well, that's quite the compliment, but I wouldn't go as far as saying that's anywhere close to what it's actually about. And yeah, it was quite fun because I was trying to do something different than I had done before. So yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. I don't know if you know like Sinead Harnett.
Mm-hmm.
You know her? Yeah,
I do.
I really dig her music, and this song kind of reminded me of her style. It's like
thanks. Yeah, that's quite a compliment as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's really good music that you do. It's easy to listen to, at least in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I always
it's not really difficult music. It's not difficult music or anything, or like there's nothing too crazy going on.
Yeah, but it gives you like a good feeling, right? It's like it's something I can put on while I'm at work, for example, and just doing my things, and then Sandra is singing in the background. It's really cool. I like it.
I guess that a lot of the times when I'm making music, that there's always some sort of catchy element. If it's a melody or a vocal line or something repetitive in terms of the melody of the vocals or something, that's basically what comes natural.
Yeah.
And obviously there were times when I tried to fight that because that was too catchy or too poppy or that sort of thing, because that's how you think at certain times. But I kind of let go of that and I embraced it, and it's not like I'm making music that I don't like and that's just what comes out of it. I like it, obviously, but yeah.
Yeah, generally it's not a bad idea to go with the flow. It's what I have found, at least for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I've talked about this with quite a few people before about what should I write about, what's important, how do you find lyrics, because the last few years I haven't had any problems with coming up with lyrics or anything, and that's just, I need lyrics, okay, and I have them in 5 minutes or something. That's something I'm really glad about, because I used to be really shitty at that back in the day. But people sometimes ask that, like, how does that work? And like you said, the things that come naturally, lyrics are the same thing. I mean, if I think of something that has profound meaning in terms of experience or that sort of thing, usually it just comes naturally. Yeah. So yeah, I guess
I
go
agree.
with the flow is a good one.
Yeah, like when I'm writing lyrics, the lyrics is the last thing I think about. It's I'm more of the feeling that I want and the vibe that I want the listeners to have. And of course, the lyrics are important to me as well, but it's not the first thing that I think about. The lyrics like when I write a song, I usually sit down on my piano and I start play something and mess around with some chords, maybe try something completely new, and then at some point there's something I like, and I just kind of go to that direction, and then I'll just start to sing. Sometimes it's just like scatting in jazz, like you're just doing syllables and stuff and try to come up with a melody, and then at some point there's just a phrase forming. And most of the time I'm just going with that. Like I have my phrase, and this is a point where I can work around. And this is how it develops.
I get it. Yeah. Well, the thing is that I would love to be able to do that more easily, because I always, in terms of lyrics and vocals, I always keep that for last, which is a really bad thing for me to do, because I'm always struggling with thinking about that. And okay, I have to add vocals to this. I have to keep that in mind. I have to keep space. And there was always moments where I just filled the space up with another melody or another element, and then I'm getting towards recording vocals, and I have the idea still in my head somewhere, and I realize, okay, I have to throw this out. This is all work for nothing, and it's part of the process. So it's not
totally
like I really mind or anything, but it's a bummer that I don't work the way that you do in certain ways, because I do want to work that way, like get it done quickly, so to speak. The initial idea in terms of laying down the chords and the melody of the vocals or something like that. I should be able to do that, but I don't know. It just didn't really work for me yet.
Well, but everybody's process is different, right? Like what works for me might not necessarily work for other people. I know that if you're playing different instruments, your process is different, even more. For example, I can't really play guitar. I've been trying to learn it, but it's a struggle, and I don't really have the patience anymore to pick up another instrument.
I'm the same with piano.
Well, the piano is my instrument. Luckily, I can work it pretty. Like if I have an idea, I can put it down on the piano pretty quickly. So this is the way that I work. But I know that guitarists, they have a completely different workflow, and also the songs that come out of a guitarist player or of a guitarist is different. It's never the same thing.
Yeah, I usually when I play the guitar, I sometimes do kind of work around chords or something like that. But usually I just noodle around a bit and I get like a melody going. Or what I really like to do is just to get some weird shapes going with my left hand and see what it sounds like. Because I'm not a theoretical genius or anything. Far from it. I'm really bad at music theory. I don't know a thing or two, but and I know what I need to know for the things that I want to do. But other than that, I'm really bad at it. And actually, that way of working makes everything almost like a surprise if something works, and then it's automatically interesting. If I know when it's interesting when I think, oh, this is a good thing, and I don't think about chords, I don't think about music theory or anything, and I usually at that point also come up with a melody or something like a vocal melody or anything, and for some reason I never lay those down. So I kind of have it in the back of my head. Like I mentioned earlier, I don't just record it quickly to have a sort of a rough or anything. I usually don't do that. And that's why I said earlier on, like I should do that, because I think my workflow can be way more efficient and quicker.
Yeah, I agree. So, like if you're having an idea, putting it down quickly is, in my opinion, is for my workflow is pretty essential. Though when it comes to the melody of the vocals, I don't do that as much as well. Sometimes I can keep it in my head if it's something that I really like. But sometimes I have like a melody that I'm like, oh yeah, that's gonna work pretty well probably, and then I'm not gonna record it, and like an hour later, it's gone.
Yeah, but I have that all the time. I think this is a good idea, and sometimes I do kind of record it like with the guitar part or something. But I don't know, I just don't. I just don't. I don't know. Yeah. It's just stubbornness or anything. Or
sometimes you're just in the zone, right? You wanna progress the song, and maybe like you and I are similar when it comes to like the vocals and the lyrics. It's not something that I prioritize, and you don't do that either, like you said before. And you don't want to bother with the lyrics if your workflow and your mind is still within like the arrangement and the chords of the song.
Good point. Because you mentioned before with the last song, like it was very atmospheric and that sort of thing. And the thing is, with that's kind of what I'm going for. You know, I kind of want to lay down the vibe, and then while I'm working on it, usually just behind my computer, I really don't even think about the lyrics at that point or the vocals or anything. Even though that, for example, with the album that I'm working on now, all the lyrics, because it's kind of a story. All the lyrics have been written for over a year, and I think I wrote most of it in a week or something.
Wow!
And like I said, like with experiences with like profound meaning and that sort of thing, then it just comes naturally. So I had no issues with that. Of course, there were bits and pieces, even with the songs I've released when recording, like, okay, this doesn't fit. How am I going to do this? Yeah. And I'm really stuck in this melody or this phrasing that I already have. Okay, I need to break out of it, but I want to finish this song, but I should probably take a break and take a fresh look at it. But
But sometimes
that's another
can't.
struggle.
Yeah.
That's a different struggle.
Yeah. Struggles of a songwriter.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly I think it's a really good thing that you have lyrics already done for your next album, and we're gonna talk about that in just a second. In my opinion, it's really good to have an approach. I'm working on something with a different approach, and I have started 6 songs so far, and I haven't written a single word yet. I haven't started with the lyrics, but the entire approach is completely different for that project. But it's like, you just have to have something that you can work around, and I think if you have the lyrics done for a year now, that's something to work with, right? Like, I imagine you can really shape your songs around that, especially if it is a coherent story.
True. Yeah, the thing is, the downside is that you kind of after a year you don't quite remember the initial yes moment when you first thought of a few good lyrics, and I sometimes get that because when I look at them again. When I'm working on one of the songs, then it is as if I'm seeing them for the first time again. Like, oh wait, did I do this? This is actually quite okay, I guess. Yeah. So it is nice, but it is also in terms of, you mentioned the approach to certain things. I'm still kind of figuring out what my ideal approach is, I guess, because about 2 or 3 months ago, when I was also working on the album already, I was pretty much convinced that this wasn't going to work anyway. That's another thing, of course, in terms of working on music. When you're just starting out, it never seems to be able, you will never be able to finish it. Yeah. That's what you think, but because you just mentioned I'm trying a different approach. Yeah, I think when this is all done, I might just do that as well. Try a few different things and maybe just force the way that you do it. For example, get that first chord structure and the first vocals down and work around that, because I'm convinced that that's a good way of working at it, and I think that can work for me, but maybe I'll try it sometime.
Yeah, honestly, I think just having an approach is really helpful, and I also think changing around your approach is pretty good, because I didn't used to work that way. I used to start with the rhythm and the beat. Which isn't apparent from my music now because it was songs that I did earlier, but as time went on, I started to change my approach, and this is the approach that I'm having now. Maybe in a year I will finally have managed to play a little bit of guitar, and maybe I'll start to work with the guitar as the initial approach, and maybe it will turn out completely different.
Yeah,
that's the fun thing. There's so many things you can try, right?
But you probably recognize as well that you start with an initial idea, and that idea just changes so much over time.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And then, but the thing is with that also makes me doubt if the approach was good. But I'm changing this all the time. So did I start it right? But I'm guessing that's just part of the process. So I'm getting better at accepting that. That's just how it goes, I guess. So I don't know. Well, it'll be a struggle anyway.
It's a weird thing, songwriting sometimes.
Yeah.
All right. So speaking about your album, one thing I wanted to ask you: your artist name is SixthFloorMemories. Yeah. And you've told me before the interview that we should talk about the SixthFloorMemories project. So
sure thing. Yeah.
So what's that all about?
As you know, it started out about 2.5 years ago, I guess, maybe a little longer. Because when people used to come up to me what are you doing creatively or something, and that came up, and I said I play guitar and I sing and that sort of thing, and I used to play in bands. People would always ask me can I watch any of your music? And aside from a few covers with old bands, that was what was online, and I never had anything released. So I wanted to release music with SixthFloorMemories. What came to be SixthFloorMemories, because I couldn't anybody who doesn't want to use their own name think of a name. And I live on the 6th floor, so that's how the name came about, because obviously they're all about things that I experienced while I was living here, so to speak, in a very broad sense, obviously. But So it was first just getting music out there. So that was the EP that I released eventually. There was a little demo of one of the songs before that, but please don't look it up. It's on YouTube, I guess. But
we're gonna do that.
and yeah, but I've always been fascinated with films and that sort of thing, and music videos and as well in terms of promotion as well, but also because you can do a lot of cool stuff with it. And when I say the SixthFloorMemories became a project, is when I started to realize that with this new album, I realized that the story that I had in mind for it was also something that could probably be really cool as sort of a movie that goes with part of the tracks, as sort of a short movie. So I dug a little into that, and as I progressed with the album, and I thought, wait, this is actually something I'm going to finish. I got more and more serious about looking into that and kind of expanding the whole project, because my sister is a photographer.
Oh, okay.
And she always does my artwork and that sort of thing, because she's pretty good at that stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm really happy with that. But the camera she has, which is a good Sony camera, is also one that you can film with. So, hey, wait, can't we just do it like this then? Because we have a camera, you know a thing or two about shooting good photographs. So maybe it's a smaller step to go towards filming. And I guess it was because when we were on a holiday last year with our parents, for the first time in 10 years or so, in the south of England, I already had a few things in mind for like a part of the movie, just a real short part. And it was kind of an experiment to see what we could do with her camera and just the two of us. And the shots, we filmed a bit over there. And actually, because of the results we got there, we were so surprised, I guess, about what we could do, that it motivated me to expand on this idea. So lately, when I'm not working on music, I'm working on the scripts and thinking out the specific shots and that sort of thing. And it's exciting stuff, because I'm digging around on YouTube a lot, also with color grading and all that good stuff. Oh, and this is a rabbit hole I'm not going to get out of, I guess.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I don't know if you know this, but I'm a graphics designer. It's like my full-time job, and and I've been recently getting into photography and cinematography as well, and it is a rabbit hole that you can lose yourself in.
Yeah,
but it's
definitely.
also what I found for me is that it elevates your content that you put out, not in a visual way, in just a visual way, but it kind of influenced my music as well.
Yeah, good point. Because I have the same. Because I don't want to talk too much about the story, because it's a bit too vague if I just tell a few things about it. But I have some songs have actually been not necessarily changed that much, but I already had like a vision of what the movie part would be with it. So I did kind of that did influence certain decisions about sections in songs, like if it works in a more cinematic way, so to speak. Because the last song on the album, for example, as well, is probably the most cinematic type of song that I've done so far, which is really exciting, because I really want to get it right, because there's all these string arrangements and all these ensembles and that sort of thing. And obviously I don't have that here, so I'm working my ass off doing that on the computer, layering stuff, retrying and that, doing it over and all that sort of thing. So I want to get it right. But particularly that song is one that got influenced a lot by what do I want to do in kind of the last chapter of that short film. So I get that. I get that a lot.
It's like a couple of things come to mind. Like the first thing is it changes your approach once more about writing something, and it's another change of approach. And it also, if you are thinking about if you're not thinking of your music as just music, but rather as a project like you do now, you're starting to think of the bigger picture of what you can do with it. And in my opinion, music is a really big art form. But it's not the only art form that you can incorporate within your music, especially if you want to like there's so many exciting avenues and alleys that you can take when you are thinking of a concept or of something
Exactly.
something
Absolutely.
bigger that you can
Yeah.
do. For example, the project that I'm working on right now, which I'm still not going to be too detailed on, it's before I even put my hands on the keyboard for the first time for the album, I invested probably like 50 hours in ideas and research and scripts and
I have the
like
same.
you know
I have the
to get
same.
an
Yeah,
idea ready
absolutely.
for
Yeah.
for how you can do it. And as you said before, like you really want to get it right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I have, and the album is going to be 8 songs, and I think about 4 of those will be for the short movie as well. And even before I started the album, I already had like a very general flow, so to speak, in my mind in terms of how the album should go and what type of songs I was going to make. And there are, I think, 8 completely different songs, and obviously that's another struggle to fit those together as well. Like just like on the first EP, how am I going to fit like these indie rock songs with this really weird electronic beat that is coming
Yeah.
afterwards? So just fade it out and fade it in. That works, you know. That works, I guess. So that's, but yeah,
But
that's
I see what you mean. It's
one way
not
of
easy
thinking
to
about
do,
it,
but
yeah.
it's definitely exciting, and it gets you it
Yeah, it is,
elevates
yeah.
you and your music if you're digging a little bit deeper.
Yeah, it gives a completely different dimension is being added to it, and that's and it's very much exciting, and also a bit
Yeah.
scary at some
Yeah.
point, because there's a lot of things that I'm going to do for the short film that are going to put me a far out of my comfort zone. But that's already what I'm doing with like trying to become better at producing the album as well in certain regards. That I'm trying new things because I want to achieve something. And keeping that in mind is sometimes difficult, but that's what keeps you on track of, okay, I'm no longer thinking about, okay, maybe one time somewhere in the future I will do something like that. Because when I was 16, I thought about recording albums and that sort of thing. And, maybe sometime in the future, but I'm getting rid of that mentality and just think, okay, I want to do this, then I'm doing it right now. Definitely now with the quarantine and all
course.
that sort of stuff. There's all the time in the world to work on certain projects. So why not do it?
You're doing it absolutely right now. Like you're using the situation we have right now to your best. And
without any feelings of guilt.
Yeah.
Because I should be doing something else. No, that's all I have to do right now.
I should be working.
Yeah,
more.
I get
I
that.
am working, but I should be working way more on my stuff than I have. But the one thing is, like you mentioned it before, like sometimes it's scary, and it's something that comes to my mind all the time about songwriting and releasing music. It's a scary thing. Like you're putting yourself out there, even exploring new avenues and new ways how you write music and create music. It's scary because the first thing that's scary about it is it's new to you, and you don't know if your quality is gonna stay the same, and if the image that you have in your head is gonna be the same. Can you actually do it? And the second.
Well, in terms of being scary about it, before I released the first EP, nobody had heard a single note of it. So I get that. I didn't even want anybody to listen to something that wasn't the final product.
And then you're completely losing yourself in too much perfectionism, which is not a good thing. But at some point, like you get the hang of it, and you write some songs, and then at some point you get a little bit of an audience. And then when you're changing around your approach and your style of music a little bit, that's the second layer of scary that gets put on top of it.
Oh man, it's so weird because last time I mixed and mastered my own EP, which was fine for the time being, and like a first time release, it was okay, and I still look back at it very satisfied. Of course, there are tons of things I could have done better, different, and all that stuff. But I thought because about a year ago I actually already started with a few songs for the album, because of course those 2 latest singles are also going to be on the album in different versions, better versions. But when I started on those, I thought, okay, I've learned so much from this first EP. This is going to be way better and way easier. And it was completely the opposite. It was way worse. I couldn't get anything done in a better way in my mind. Nothing was clicking or working.
Completely know
so,
where you're coming from.
That was the weirdest thing. Was also the time when I at that time I also decided, okay, I'm not going to mix and master my own stuff anymore. That's just that there's just no single bit of fun in it left anymore.
I completely agree, and I'm the same way. Like I do my mixes. I still do that because I don't know. I don't want to spend the money, to be honest. And I've invested so much time in learning how to mix properly, or more or less properly, I guess. So I think I'm probably gonna do it myself. But I'm not mastering anymore myself. I give that to a guy from Atlanta, the Justin. You know him as well.
Yeah, I know him.
He does it really well.
I know of him, and I know him.
Like he mastered my song that I released last year, Worth It. He mastered that one. The one that came out this year, the acoustic version. I did that myself because it's just piano and vocals. It's not really that much of a challenge to master.
Well, if you feel confident enough, like, okay, I can do this, then that's also already quite a big step in being able to do it. If you think I can do this, then you'll push yourself towards a good end result.
But honestly, for a bigger production, I just couldn't be bothered to master it myself anymore. I really can't.
No, I get that. Yeah.
All right. So you've been talking about a coherent story in your in your album, and you've also told me that you're studying psychology.
True.
Does that have any influence on each other?
Yeah, I guess it has. Not so much like very consciously. I learned this at university, at psychology classes, so I'm applying this or anything. Wouldn't even really know how that would work, so to speak. But obviously it influences me, and also with just the experiences that I now have ever since I'm studying here. I'm studying for quite a long time now as well, so that's also an aspect of life, so to speak, where I feel right now that I really want to. I feel ready to just go really do something and earn some money, for example. So there are struggles on that end as well. So it does influence it altogether, because parts of the album are also about personal struggles, obviously, because that's what you do when you write an album.
Yeah, of course.
And certain aspects of that certainly come into play. Yeah, the things that I've encountered over the last few years, and in terms of looking at things, in terms of learning about dealing with certain problems or issues. Obviously, that's something that psychology can help with, or that you can take things from. And that I think it did influence my new album quite a bit, but not in a very direct manner. But indirectly, it did a lot. Yeah,
indirectly.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I can understand that. So what I was thinking. Like I'm very much interested in psychology as well, and I believe if my life would have taken a different paths, then I don't think it would be far off to think that I might have gotten into psychology as well. For some reason, what I've noticed, people usually tend to come to me with their problems. For some reason, like I just like talking to people and listening to their problems, and I have what people have told me, at least, is that I was able to help a few people with some advice here and there. Of course, I know nothing or almost nothing about psychology whatsoever, so it's a really interesting avenue. But what I believe has influenced my music, so to speak, is the way that I think about things heavily influences the way that I put down lyrics. For example, I'm really not obvious with the way that I write. I like to be cryptic, and I do believe that because I am interested in how can I phrase that? In the way that you might think, or the way that people will think, depending on how you phrase something. Yeah. I think because of that, it has influenced how I did phrase certain songs.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah. The thing is with that sort of thing is that in terms of like studying psychology, and that aspect, for example, did studying psychology influence that? Well, it's obviously something that I am interested in from within myself, and that's also why I got interested in psychology. So it's not like a one-way street in that sense. So yeah, you're interested in that way of thinking, in that way of evoking emotions, probably within people, or oh, how are they going to perceive this, that sort of thing. But that's the same mindset in my case, for example, and also in your case, that makes you probably interested in psychology. But then again, in my case, yeah, psychology also influences in terms of how I write future stuff, so to speak, because in terms of like what we talked about before, in terms of approaches and that sort of thing, and about getting it right, so to speak. What I've learned a lot in terms of with psychology are also things with mindfulness and that sort of thing, and in terms about acceptance and taking certain perspectives on looking at certain things, and that's something that helped me in terms of with my music as well, in terms of accepting that okay, this isn't the finished product yet, but I'm working on it. I was always really hard on myself in terms of it was not right or it was not finished yet or something, and I'm beginning to get better at accepting that sort of thing. And I think that is also something that's really been influenced by studying psychology, obviously.
I can see how that could play out.
Yeah, you learn a thing or two about how the brain works, of course. So and
it's super interesting.
Yeah, my major is actually cognitive neuropsychology. So we combine a lot of aspects from biology as well, in terms of parts of the brain, and also in terms of the type of research you do in that department. I'm going to do my master's in clinical psychology, the more classical psychology, as you would say, in terms of the therapists you go to see to have a talk with about problems, and in terms of doing a therapy session, that sort of thing. But yeah, there's all kinds of aspects to dimensions to psychology that I'm really excited about. So I guess all those kind of influence me in one way or another.
And it's really, really interesting. Like one thing that I remember from my past, I once worked with how do you say that in English? It was a hypnotherapist.
Yeah.
Or an ongoing hypnotherapist, and hypnosis is a completely different rabbit hole to go down, and but he, of course, like it's connected to psychology as well, but I don't think it's like in the classical psychology manner. But he told me a lot of really interesting things in terms of like the brain and what people and how you can influence people like in a manipulative way, like scary things that I don't really want to. I don't really want to get into too much, but some parts of being able to manipulate people are quite helpful sometimes.
Definitely, yeah.
And I don't want to say like I want to manipulate people, right? It's more like helping people to realize what you wants them to understand.
Yeah.
And I think in some cases when it comes to songwriting, that's more or less exactly what you do.
Well, that's a good one, because in terms of psychology, one of the hardest things in psychology, also with helping people, is defining the problem correctly. So you can apply that to music as well. My song isn't done yet, isn't finished yet. This isn't working. But what is the problem exactly? Is there a section not working? Are you trying to make a synthesizer do a thing that it just cannot do because it's a completely different sound? Are you missing something? Are you putting too much in it? What exactly is the problem here? And that's the same with people, with helping people in a psychological way, in a psychological sense. Because you mentioned before, like, people come to me for help sometimes, and I often can apparently give good advice. Yeah, but you're the one looking from the outside in. You're sort of the objective perspective on the situation.
Exactly. Yeah.
So and you can even compare that, for example, to giving feedback on music. Well, I don't know where to go with this song next. What should I do? Well, I've now heard it for the first time, and I noticed this and this and this. You mix your bass way too hard, that sort of thing. It can be anything,
like
but
absolutely.
If you think that's in terms of psychology, the overall perspective or general perspective that I really enjoy in that, in terms of helping people and that sort of thing. What's the point where you're at? What's point A, so to speak, and what's point B? Where are you trying to go? What are you trying to achieve? What do you encounter along the way? Is it actually a problem? Is it something you want to achieve? And then again, like I said, what exactly is a problem? What is the obstacle to getting somewhere? Yeah, that's the whole thing that I find really interesting in all sorts of aspects of psychology.
Yeah. So it seems like it's more connected, or it's you can draw a connection from making music to psychology pretty easily.
Definitely,
It seems. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of
That's really
there's a lot of
interesting.
interesting studies as well on psychology and music as well. I don't really know any examples at the moment, but there are quite a few interesting studies done because they want to know, do musicians the brains of musicians, do they work differently? Are there
Yeah.
processes going on that we don't really get? And I do remember, like with really complex chords and that sort of thing, that musicians who train musicians, so to speak, professionals, can kind of perceive that differently, or other parts of the brain light up, so to speak, or get activated because they process them differently or quicker, for example. So yeah, definitely something I'm interested in as well. I mean, as a musician, obviously.
Me as well. I have heard like a few things here and there about how brains of musicians are different. I even heard that different types of musicians think in a different way.
Yeah.
For example, if a pianist and a guitarist speak to each other, they tend to think the same way. And I would bet that if a drummer and a bassist talk to each other, they will probably think in a similar way as well.
Yeah, or they kind of connect on one point and they don't on another point or something. Yeah, absolutely. And that's probably a lot to do with the process of learning things and the way that rewires your brain, so to speak. That's a bit broad. So actually, rewire your brain.
But I know what you mean. Yeah. So one thing that I've always fascinated me was, you know, that my approach is giving the feeling to the listener, and I believe that you can give the most feelings that you want the listeners to have. You can give that with a single instrument. It has to be a clean instrument, for example, a piano or maybe a guitar. Of course, the instrument influences a lot how you want how the song will sound, but just simply a chord influences very heavily on how a person will feel, or maybe a progression of notes.
Well, people know that from research that you can usually not really distinguish more than 3 different elements, for example, in a song at the same time. You hear different things, and you hear things happening, but you can't really keep your mind focused. And don't pin me on that, don't quote me on that. But there is a limitation as to what you can perceive, so to speak. And usually, like some of the biggest hits, you recognize a certain melody or a certain rhythm about them. You don't remember how the guitars were quad-tracked and there was an extra layer of bass coming in at that point with a little bit more distortion. I mean, a good example of that is, for example, like Bad Guy by Billie Eilish, for example. Everybody knows the melodies from that track, even if you don't like it, even if you've only heard it once. That's something that sticks with you, and that works. That's also, of course, something to do with how catchy something is, and that doesn't have to do anything to do with genres, for example, specifically. So what you said in terms of that initial chord structure or that initial intro to the song or something, of course that can stick and that can work really well. I mean, I spoke earlier today with someone about how people who grow up in the zeros and had who went through the whole emo phase, so to speak. If they heard that first note from Welcome to the Black Parade from My Chemical Romance, that first piano note, they know the song. That's one note.
That's one note,
and it works.
It's really true. Yeah. So I think there's a lesson to be learned in there, and it's something that I try to pay attention to, but I actually never phrased it the way that I thought of right now. Is I always try to have a carrying element in a song.
Good stuff.
And I've always mentioned it as a carrying element, but you could also rephrase it as the element that people will remember.
Yeah, that's
for example, from my song Worth It, it was the first piano melody, the dee 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 dee. that was the thing that carried.
Yeah, but
carries
also
throughout
the
entire
way you
song.
repeat like the "Is it all worth it?" That
Yeah.
thing that sticks with you, and that's not.
That sticks as well.
Yeah, that sticks, and
Yeah.
I think about that as well in what you just said. Like that element that sticks is actually quite a good one, because
it's
like
really important as
like
well.
the atmospheric thing that I had in my latest single, those are all guitars, but that was the whole thing that I had in my mind. Like that has to carry the song, and of course you decide halfway through production, like, okay, it shouldn't be the whole song, but it should be something that comes back and that instantly catches you. Like, oh yeah, that's that sound again, there's that feeling again. And I have that with a few other tracks as well, like with the previous single Innocent as well, like the sustained bass line, the real simple bass line that song has, with just a little bit of movement in the verses, and that combined with a really simple beat, and it just works. And it's not the greatest song ever, it's not the most interesting song ever or anything, but it was enough to make it work. And with a few simple melodies, it was pretty much done. I was actually a song in terms of changing your approaches, where I thought, okay, try and keep it as simple as possible. If you want to add another layer to something, a new element, okay, sit down for 10 minutes and think if it's really something that you should add, or if you can leave it out. And most of the time I could leave it out. And
most of the time, absolutely. I've done the same mistake of overloading. Overloading
I've actually
songs. And here's the thing.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, earlier today as well, I was working on one of the tracks of the album, and I just deleted 2 layers. I was kind of pre-mixing it with a reference track, like, okay, if I were to mix this, with the reference track, what would it be like, sorta, and just to see if anything was lacking on the production side, or something was too much. And I was having this layer of keys that was kind of in the low mids, and there was also like a few pads going on. And it was just clashing with each other, and those keys just didn't add anything. They kind of had a percussive element to them with the attack, but it was negligible because it would have been so low in the mix. And I was thinking from the mixing perspective, what would you do with a layer like this? Yeah, kind of dial it in like minus 30 dB and leave it there and say, yeah, it's in there. So I removed it, and I did that with another couple of layers, and that's something I do wrong more often than.
Well, it's a trap that you can fall into.
100%, yeah.
And I have fallen into that trap many times.
Still do.
Where it was just overloaded by stuff. Yeah. And there are 2 sides to this coin. So like one thing that I wanna, like a really good thing that my current boss taught me. He mentioned it in connection with design, of course, because a design company. Mm-hmm. But it's very, very much applicable to music as well. And the thing is, an accent is an accent so long as it's an accent.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So if you have like a really cool element, like a short, maybe like 3 notes or something that like spice up the song, and you're like, wow, that's awesome, it's really cool, and then you're just looping it through the entire song, it completely loses its value and its meaning. And so that's a trap that you can fall into, to have too many exciting things happening.
It's a good one, because that's also something that I'm getting better at in terms of layering. Layering used to be, for me, used to be too much, putting more and more elements in it, and not, okay, I have this synthesizer part and it just needs a little bit more low end, so I can make a layer that basically does the same thing and just fills something up. But no, that had to be interesting. That did another melody, or or there was sustained notes throughout, and or whatever. And what I ended up with was something that was just unmixable, because you had. Yeah. It was as if you had 6 lead guitars at the same time. You couldn't make a decision.
At some point, it's just too much.
Yeah, and that also distracts from what you actually had in mind for the song. And I started to change the beat again, because it didn't really fit with this track that I added. And then a month later, for example, I would open the project again because I forgot all about it. And I thought, hey, wait, I can't even just say what the main element was anymore. So I'm dialing it back, and I'll realize, oh yeah, I started with this. Why the hell did I add this line and this line and this line, and probably 20 more, because that's how it goes.
Yeah.
Should be
Yeah,
functional.
so I guess
Yeah.
like at some point, like you're building up a song and you're adding a bunch of stuff because that's what you do when you're making a song. You have to build it, but then at some point it's just probably best to just take another look at it and start taking things away and see if it still
Yeah.
works. Though I will say, it has happened many times before that adding something very vital was the key to make a song coherent.
That's a good point as well.
This is actually what happened to the pop version of Worth It in the chorus. The chorus is like very strong and heavy, right? And there's I don't know if you notice
The
it,
arpeggio.
but if you go back and hear it, there's in the background of the chorus there's an element going from left to right, back and forth, and it's like a synth or something, and it's just
Yeah, the arpeggio, you mean, or not?
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
an arpeggio,
I know.
exactly.
I've noticed that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm a music producer.
Yeah.
I noticed that thing. Not
Yeah,
like I'm a
you
good
noticed
music
stuff.
producer, but that's a cool thing that he did there. 'Cause
Yeah, but would you guess that wasn't in at first, and it didn't work? The song did not work
I hadn't
because that wasn't
thought about
in.
it, but thinking about it right now, I can completely imagine that the song doesn't work without that element.
Yeah.
And those kind of elements, in terms of, because you mentioned like it's something that goes from left to right and panning stuff. Oh, there's this song by the Wildlife which is a band that I really enjoy as well. That has, I think it's a guitar part. I can't remember exactly. That goes from left to right in a section of the song. I think it's the chorus as well. And I think if you left that out, the song wouldn't work. And it's such a simple part because it's a properly mixed and mastered record. So I listen to it and I dig into it, like what's going on with this song? Why is this so interesting? And I was always thinking there was something's going on there and something's going on there. A lot of things are happening. And then I listened to it on my studio monitors, and I realized, wait, in that section, there's actually just one guitar, maybe a layer or something underneath it, but there's just one guitar going from left to right. And I think that's what makes that section work now. So yeah. Exactly what you just said.
It can be
I can
things
completely
like that,
relate.
simple
Yeah.
things. Yeah, like if maybe that helps. Like I listened to that chorus over and over again, and I rearranged it many times. And I usually consult a couple of friends, and especially my dad, because my dad is a very good musician as well, and his opinion is always very valuable to me. And he said that it's dragging.
Yeah.
That the chorus is dragging, and I knew it, and I didn't know how to fix it. And then I started to think, if a very very simple song works, why does this song not drag, and why does my song drag? And what I noticed is I didn't have a carrying element. For example, in a song by the Beatles, what do you have? You have a guitar, you have a bass, you have a drum, and you have the vocals. That's 4 things. But the thing that was missing was the hi-hat. Like if you have a hi-hat during a song, it just drives it. You know the tempo, and it's a pace.
It's a funny thing to mention because I added this horrible hi-hat in Love Is No Game that comes in through the choruses, and I did that kind of on purpose. Like, okay, can I make this song literally work by adding such a repetitive, almost ridiculous hi-hat element? And I did it, and I thought this was missing.
Oh,
this was missing.
I know which one, like the half open hi-hat.
Yeah, that as well. Yeah, the whole hi-hat part. So the 16th notes going on, and it just worked. I thought, okay,
it worked.
Can I do this? Can I do this? Yeah, can I do this?
It drives the song. Yeah.
Like, and I guess
I didn't have that in Worth It. Like there was no hi-hat going on. It was pretty much just like big crashes and stuff like that to make it way more dramatic than it probably needed to be. But I didn't have a rhythmic drive.
Yeah, I don't know about you,
like
but I always really struggle with like layering with percussion elements and adding those ear candy things in terms of the percussion. That's something I've always struggled with and still struggle with. And just recently on one of the tracks on the album, I wanted to have a more bit of an experimental side to it. And I was just trying out a few things, and I guess it's just because I've learned a lot of things about that sort of stuff over the years. And all of a sudden, I had a few elements, and it started to work. And I thought, wait, and now I have to add like little variations, little things. Not the old school layering that I used to do with too many layers going on, but little elements here and there, and then a tone here, and a little bit of a note over there. And then it just worked, and I let a couple of friends listen to it, and they really loved it. They really did think that it was something special, so I can't wait to hear other people's opinions about it as well.
Well, it's exactly, really,
but like you said, getting feedback as well, that's also something I really didn't do as well. So that combined with being very specific in terms of what you need to add to a song. Is it something big? Is it something just a tiny thing? Because for example, as well in electronic music, like downlifters and risers and that sort of thing, sometimes like sort of white noise type of elements can just add so much without them being anything interesting. It's noise.
It's just build up.
Yeah, it's noise.
Build up and release.
But it works. But it works. Yeah. So exactly. Yeah, I get that. I get that completely, man. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, also like it's probably good to think of the different elements as needed elements instead of needed instruments.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
For example, like the element that I used kind of replaced the role of the hi-hat, and it was a synth. But I just needed something there that sounds fast, and usually the hi-hat is what has that role, and it was missing. So I couldn't put it in because the hi-hat just sounded ridiculous. I tried.
Been there.
So
there.
It needed to be something else. I needed to work around it, and I don't know. But things like that, like you progress so much as a musician when you notice stuff like that, and when especially and the satisfaction that comes from resolving a problem that you had.
Definitely,
it's immense.
And that's also something good you touch on now, because I was always really bad at noticing that I'm making good progress or doing something right, and I really try to notice that more, because if you finish the song, then you've probably about 100 times during that process done something that you thought, oh, this is good. And you forget. You tend to really easily forget about that, or at least that's
really true.
For me, that's the case.
Yeah.
And
you get used to it pretty quickly.
Yeah, exactly. And and I always really try to hold on to the initial thought that I had. Oh, this excited me when I first heard it, because you know how it goes. Definitely, if you still mix your own stuff, it's not interesting anymore.
No,
not after the fourth time you've listened to an element, and definitely not after the 100th time when you're mixing it.
And then if you're mastering it again, you're kind of restarting that entire process, and then you get way too lost in the details, and at the end you have your fixed final master number 1, and then you have your fixed final definite master number 2.
I think if I ever mix a song myself again, I'll just add final after each other, just to see how long the file name will be. So this is final version, and then even add version 2.
Number 1.
Something like that.
Yeah, it's really the struggle.
Yeah, it is. It truly is. Yeah,
it is. That's why I don't master anymore myself.
Yes, it's a completely different type of art, I guess.
All right, so you live in the Netherlands, right? So I wanted to ask, what's the situation, like the musical situation for an indie artist, like in the Netherlands?
Oh, that's a good question. I think like in every country, in terms of the radio stations and that sort of thing, that there's very specific types of music that they like. For example, if you compare the Netherlands to Belgium, in Belgium there's way more alternative music, more. I wouldn't necessarily say alternative rock sort of thing, but there's a lot of singer-songwriters and dance music in the Netherlands. Of course, we have a lot of great DJs as well. So obviously, that's no surprise. Yeah. But for indie artists, there are quite a few things that you can do in terms of promotion and getting out there, but it's hard. I think that's probably everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, getting if you mean it in a way of getting paid for what you do, in terms of performing and releasing music, well, good luck to you. That's a struggle, and I think that's not necessarily very different from other countries in Europe or anything. To be honest, I can't say too much about it because I didn't dig into it too much myself, and of course, yeah, in terms of social media and that sort of thing, I guess that's just a good platform to nowadays.
And it opens up
promote your music
the entire
and stuff
world.
anyway.
Like,
that's the kind of thing, you know. So yeah, if you kind of take it back to more like a music scene in the Netherlands, when I was in secondary school, there was still like a few events for like pop bands from the school, and I think they still have that at the end of the year as well right now. But even I noticed that when our bands were sort of dying out or stopping, and that there wasn't that much interesting new stuff coming, or not saying the bands are not interested, but there wasn't as much metal music in class, I guess, at that point.
I see.
Well, now that I say it, I do kind of know younger people who are really into that. Well, probably not the best point ever.
All right, I see. Well, it's you know, as you said, it's tough everywhere. Like but I would say in Switzerland, the Swiss music industry is generally speaking pretty supportive of their Swiss musicians because it is pretty small. But yeah, it's tough everywhere, and I'm sure and if you're using social media to your fullest, then it kind of doesn't really matter all that much. And to be honest, I think if you're gonna keep going at it, you're gonna make it far. I'm sure you'll find the satisfying success that you're looking for. Absolutely.
Well, it would be good. It would be good. As you know, music isn't my main priority in life, but of course there are thoughts going on in my head, like, well, if something works, or if I see an opportunity, or maybe with this album, I think, well, maybe I can do a little bit more, or another step upwards.
All right, so I have two more questions for you to round it off. The first one is,
sure,
what is your biggest goal that you think you can attain with your music?
Well, it's funny that you should ask that, because I've thought about that quite a lot, and also talked about that with people. If I, for example, can release an album sometime and have a little tour with that, just around clubs in the Netherlands, or maybe even in a few neighboring countries, for example, and that's the highest possible thing that I can achieve with my band or with my project, completely fine with me. That's more than I'm already asking for, basically. Yeah. So yeah, it's not too big.
But it's a nice goal to have, and it's very much attainable.
Just
I
to
believe.
have a little bit experience, have experienced it a bit. For example, like the touring and the whole process around the release of an album.
So, second question: what's your biggest dream regarding to music?
Well, I don't think about that in terms of being world famous and that sort of thing. But if I can stretch it to the project, then I would think that I would. I think I'd like it really if people would really enjoy, for example, the current thing that I'm working on. Basically because I have a lot of anxiety, and I'm really breaking boundaries for myself right now as well, in terms of pushing through and going on with it and trying to achieve things that are out of my comfort zone, and for people to notice that, so to speak, like, hey, there's somebody who really put a lot of effort into this, not necessarily because I have anxiety issues or something, but that people can appreciate it for the thing that it is, in terms of how much time and effort went into it.
Totally understand that, and I'm very sure that people will appreciate it a lot. After hearing what you told me today, I'm very excited for the project. It sounds really intriguing, and I will be on you. And if you're not going to release it, I will be asking for it time and time again.
Yeah, well, the music part of it is pretty much not done, but that's one thing I'm sure of. Okay, that's going to be finished, because I've kind of done that before. You know, I know that I can get that. You know the process. The film part, I'm really excited about, and I know I can make it work, but I just have to do it.
So, that's really true. You have to do it. But that's also that's really all you have to do. You just have to do it.
True.
Yeah. And I'm sure you can do it, and you'll do a great job. And I'm excited to see.
I hope so. Yeah. Thanks.
All right, so we're gonna wrap it up here. Sander, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. It was a very, very interesting interview, and it was very enjoyable talking to you.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Of course, man. And before we leave, tell the people how they can find you.
Well, I release my music on all platforms, so on YouTube and that sort of thing. And on Spotify, it's always SixthFloorMemories. That's the same on Instagram. Facebook isn't very active, but if you want to, add me there as well. So SixthFloorMemories everywhere.
Awesome. The links of Sander will be in the description box below, of course. I highly recommend you listen to his music and check out his Instagram as well. Also, we didn't mention this, but his Instagram is completely black and white, so he has a coherent style.
99%.
99%, right? 99% black and white, which is really, really, it's, how can I say that? It's very artistic. It's very artistic, and I like it a lot. And if there's a black and white picture popping up in my feed, I'm sure it's 99% sure it's probably Sander.
Probably.
All right, cool. Well, thank you so much for coming again, and I will talk to you again soon. Yep. Bye.